Good day, friends. Today we're looking at species from the genus known as Collodictyon. This is a freshwater species that is found dispersed worldwide and is not always easily found in environmental samples. There have been 4 known species described in history, beginning with the type species Collodictyon triciliatum, first discovered by Henry John Carter in 1865. The additional known species discovered are Collodictyon spursivaculatum, which was discovered by Skuja in 1956, Collodictyon hongkongensis, discovered by Sfortzau in 1968, and Collodictyon indicum, discovered by Liengar in 1981. It is also notable from a classification point of view that Collodictyon and some other protists, which we now know are phylogenetically related, have a history of being mysterious in terms of their classification. Recently, the Collodictyon has been moved to the so-called supergroup known as crumbs, which contains the Collodictyon rigiphyllida and mantamonas. These are mostly supported by genomic sequencing as opposed to the older methods of, looking at morphology and structure and things like that. In terms of the actual characteristics of the Collodictyon, the general length of the organism range from 30 to 50 micrometers in length. They are sort of amoebozoid-like in that they're able to grow what are called pseudopods, which kind of extend out from the body and help them basically engulf prey. You can actually see this in the species shown here, where the organism takes on this kind of shape where the anterior side of it has the 2 noticeable bumps, which are the pseudopods that are growing out there, and sometimes they look more horn-like almost, whereas on the other side of the organism, on the anterior side, there are 4 flagella present to aid in the motion. It appears that the Collodictyon cannot survive without consuming or engulfing algae, and this eukaryote is an omnivore in that it consumes both algal cells as well as bacterial cells, along with other small protists. It's also notable that Collodictyon contains tubular cristae in the mitochondria, as opposed to the lamellar plate-like cristae that you tend to see in eukaryotes. This is the more ancestral or original form of cristae that are a little bit less highly specialized, which kind of suggests that the Collodictyon is more related to the earliest of the eukaryotic ancestors, being able to maintain this more ancient metabolic structure without having the more specialized lamellar cristae. Another interesting finding is that Collodictyon and its closest known relatives in Diphalia have been shown in electron microscope observations during telophase to have two chromosomal masses surrounded by the nuclear envelope within the dividing parental nucleus. And so the researchers who've seen this have described it as a semi-open type of orthomitosis. And this is reminiscent of what you might find in some of the more primitive protists, like actinophirids. And this is a feature where the nuclear envelope itself is largely intact. So the mitosis in Collodictyon in the lineage is what you might call primitive or closed. And so that's a little bit different than what you might see in other eukaryotes. This is more characteristic of the earlier ones, and one of the reasons why it besides the phylogenetics analysis is kind of being looked at again and reclassed. Regarding the feeding habits, again, Collodictyon is an omnivore. It has been suggested that engulfed algal cells could possibly be used in a symbiotic relation with the Collodictyon, in that it's been suggested by Robert Clinton Rhodes in 1919 in the book titled Binary Fission in Collodictyon triciliatum, that they had observed a possible symbiosis between Collodictyon and the algal cells of the Chlorella vulgaris species. And this is something they had noted, that it's possible that during the engulfment that the Collodictyon basically takes the chloroplast to generate energy through photosynthesis. And it's also possible that this is what Rhodes called benign domestication, and not actual symbiosis, as Chlorella had not been demonstrated to have benefited from this anyway. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this short summary of kind of the history of Collodictyon species, some of their different morphology attributes, and different characteristics. It is a enigmatic protist in the sense of how it's been historically classified and kind of mischaracterized as a dinoflagellate or something like that. And it is very interesting because of its similarity to amoebozoa, and its use of pseudopods and in order to engulf prey, as well as its flagella themselves. Those are pretty interesting, the placement of those and how they function. I believe, actually, just to add a little bit to the function of the flagella, besides locomotion, Rhodes had suggested as well that they have a role in actually capturing prey as well. And so that's interesting. But overall, it's interesting to learn about this very kind of ancient distant eukaryote that is currently under research, and I guess, harder to classify than, some of the more common protists. I will say as well that I was able to find a pretty large population of these, and they exist in a local pond here in Wisconsin. It's a fairly stagnant pond, and, being in a more northern climate, it seems to align with some of the other research areas for this organism, such as Norway. But in terms of its environmental scarcity, I believe it tends to be on the rarer side of environmental samples, in that it is not something you might readily find, which leads to it being poorly studied, as I've seen written in different academic papers on this subject. So that is interesting, but just wanted to show this organism and its motion, and just talk about it a little bit. If you have any other interesting facts that you'd like to share about these species, please let me know, and leave a comment. Thank you for watching, and we shall see you in the next discovery. Goodbye.